check the email that you registered with on Eventbrite, and you'll get the recording, you'll get the download files, and some other resources. There will be a feedback form as well, which I'll talk about. Would really, really appreciate any feedback from this session. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is George Mount. I'm a Microsoft Excel MVP, LinkedIn Learning instructor, O'Reilly author. I do data analytics training and consulting for a living, and I do these sessions just for outreach and for marketing. I hope you get some good stuff out of them. You can see in my archives, I've got hours and hours of 100% free training and free content for your edification and hopefully for mine too. Please leave feedback. Okay, and again, we're going to be talking about analyzing data with Python in Excel today. That's our topic. Python in Excel is a newer feature in Excel. I'm really excited about it, and I think there's a lot of potential here. Still a lot of confusion, I think, among users about what Python in Excel can do for you. So what I want to do today is highlight some just real quick wins, get you familiar with the tool to the extent that I can. We are going to dive right in. I'm assuming you've got Python and Excel ready to go, as I talked about in the prerequisites. So if you have any problems like loading it, I'll try my best, but that's what I do consulting for. You can get in touch with me that way as well. So what are we going to talk about today in particular with Python and Excel? Some basics for cleaning data. You're going to see that there are some particular things that are just a little more fluid for whatever reason in Excel. In Python than in Excel. One of those is missing values. If you ever deal with data sets that just have values that aren't there for whatever reason, Python might be a really good win for you there. Working with time series, I think a lot of us know that dates in Excel, kind of the butt of many internet jokes. Excel doesn't handle dates too well in general. All right. And then with time permitting, we might get into a couple visualizations. I'm working on some more content on data visualization with Python and Excel. Of course, analysis and visualization go together. If we have time also, I will show you how to use Copilot to actually automate a lot of the process here. So if you're not familiar with Python code, if that's the part that's scaring you from doing this, is that you don't want to learn a new coding language, well, the nice part with that is now with Copilot, you don't necessarily have to learn the language from scratch, right? You have the power of AI there at your back to help you. So that's our agenda for today. And as always, the first thing, if you do have any questions, you're welcome to use the chat. That's going to be the best way to get a hold of me. Okay. And the other thing will be, of course, the download files so that you can follow along and so that you have the exercises with you if you want to look at them later. So let me put that right now in the chat. Now, usually what happens is that people kind of drift in and out of this session and they don't have access to the chat. So what I end up doing usually is sharing it a lot of times. So if you see me, just peppering the chat with this link, that's the reason why. If I don't see someone asking, you're welcome to circulate it again. And the chat's going to be the best way to reach me. I've got everybody's cameras and microphones turned off just to avoid any kind of like ambient noises. People forget to mute themselves or, got a hot camera kind of thing. So we want to avoid those problems. So I'll just have everything shut off, but you can use the chat whenever you want. I'll try to keep an eye on it. And the first thing we're using the chat for is to share those download links with you, or the one download link to be specific. What you need to do there is just download this onto your PC. Okay, I'm assuming most of you are on PCs. I believe Python and Excel is available on most versions of Excel for Mac right now. Not the expert. A lot of versions of Excel flown out there. This is the real important part. Okay, everybody, make sure that you extract all. Okay, because otherwise you might have some problems downloading everything. So take a second to do that. I see some people coming into the chat already who weren't here before, which is fine. Hello. I'm putting that link in the chat again for those resources. So you're going to see some workbooks. You're going to see a deck. This is our deck. Not going to spend much more time with the deck, but people like to have it. Most of our time is going to be surprisingly or not, in Excel. Okay, so take a second to do that, and if you could, just give me like a thumbs up. You know, there are a couple ways to do that in Teams. I just left one in the chat, like the reaction to that comment in the chat. If you want to do it that way. I know there's also like a reaction you can put in there. So yeah, okay. I see people putting thumbs up in there. Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. If there are any questions, just use the chat for that. And we're going to start with the quick wins folder file here, I should say. All right, I just want to show you the basics of working with Python and Excel. So we're all on the same page. There's more to be said for that, but then get into some real, just simple use cases for things that I personally find a little bit easier to do in Python than in Excel. So we're going to quick wins right now. Okay, and you're going to see a data set in there. Okay, we've got sales, looks pretty typical. It's just like a typical, retail sales kind of data set. So I do have this in a table. Would definitely encourage you to store your data in a table if you're going to use Python and Excel, or frankly, like almost any new Excel feature in general. So whether you're looking at like Python and Excel, Power Automate, Copilot, all those tools are going to work a lot better in with your data in a table. So that's the first step we're going to do. I do see a hand raised. If you do have a question, you could just leave it in the chat, and I will take a look at that as soon as possible. So we do need to read this data into Python and Excel. All right, so the first one we're going to do is go over to formulas. Now you should see a group in here that says Python. Now I don't see this right now, so I've been having this a lot for some reason when I go on to train. And the way that you could fix this is if you don't see Python in Excel, you had it earlier, what we're going to do is just reset our ribbon. Okay, so if you've ever done this before, we're going to go to File. I'm going to go to Options here. Okay, and where this says Customize Ribbon, right here, okay, let's just do a reset. So I'm doing this for myself because I don't see Python. I don't see any references to Python up here in the Formulas tab. I should. I'm going to reset all customizations, and let's click OK. And for whatever reason, it's there now. So I don't know why that's the case, but if you're having that problem, that's where you should go. So first thing we need to do is import this data into Python and Excel. We're going to do that with the py function. So what we'll do here is we're going to read our data set. So we do have it stored in a table, but we want to actually store it in the Python and Excel environment. Think of like Power Query, where you've got the data in a table in your workbook, but you need to like make a copy of it and name it into a table in Power Query to work on it in Power Query. Basically the same thing that we're doing right now. So let's go ahead and call this data set something like, let's call it sales DF. Okay, DF is just a shorthand for data frame. So a data frame in Python is like a table in Excel. Typically the kind of data that you're going to be working with in this environment. It's got rows, it's got columns. It looks like a table like this. So we're going to assign that to this data here. Now the easiest way to do this is to just drag and drop your data. So what I would suggest you do is either with your mouse, or if you want to use those keyboard shortcuts like Control Shift left, Control Shift and down, you should see something like this. And I will put this in the chat in case you don't get that. Control Enter, okay, is going to be your execution on that. So make sure you Control Enter that. Don't just hit Enter. That's not going to be enough here. Okay, so that is the first thing. You should see something like data frame, okay, and then you're going to go ahead and proceed to the next step here. So any questions about that? Hopefully everybody is able to do that. All right, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to keep going. Now, in general, when you work with data in Python, you're storing everything as an object, okay? So when we see this data frame, that's just telling us the type of object that this is. It's called sales DF, and it's a data frame. If we wanted to know a little bit more about this data set, we've got a lot of options. One of them that's kind of cool in Python and Excel is we're using these linked data types here. So what we can do here is if you click right on where it says PY, there's going to be a pop-up that says show card. go ahead and click that and you will see a little pop-up screen here, okay? And this will give you a little preview of that data set, so that's kind of nice to have. Our other option is to actually show the entire workbook, I'm sorry, the entire data set right inside of Excel, right? So where it says data frame, what if we, instead of just seeing the name of this data frame, we could see all the data in the worksheet. Now to do that, we're going to go right over here to Python object, where there's this drop down, okay? Right now we're seeing the name of that object or the type specifically. It's a data frame. Let's bring that over to Excel value. And what that's going to do is actually show everything, the entire data set, right, in the worksheet. Okay, now that could be nice, but it also takes up a lot of space. So if we wanted to maybe just get a sample of rows, I know this is really typical with like databases, if you worked with SQL before, generally what people are going to do is, instead of printing the entire data set, which is going to take up a lot of space and memory, just print like the first few rows. So that's what we're going to do here as our first step with analyzing our data. So I'm going to switch this back to Python object, okay, and now let's go ahead and just insert another cell here. So if I do equals py, what we can do here is we're going to refer to our data set as the name of that data frame, right? This is our table. We're going to run sales df. I'm going to put a dot in there. I'm going to put a head. This is going to kind of look like a function, but a little bit different. So the way that Python works, being object-oriented, there's these things called methods that work similarly to functions. You'll see, again, this looks like kind of a function, except we're applying it to an object. Let's go ahead and just run that. We'll see we get data frame again, but what we can do now is actually change that to a Excel value. So what we're doing here is just showing like the first 5 rows, for example. That's the default. If we wanted to see the first 10 rows, we could easily do that. So it's a little bit of a compromise, kind of nice when you're working with really, really big data. Often, sometimes it's a little bit annoying when you're working with your data. You want to operate on it, but you don't want it to hog up as much space in the worksheet as it's taking. So this is a nice little compromise there, and also kind of gets your feet wet with how Python and Excel is going to work. Now, one of my personal favorites here is actually the sample method, and this is actually kind of hard to do if you've ever needed to do this in Excel, is if you need to take a sample of rows for whatever reason, just randomly sample from a data set. Maybe you're a teacher like me and you need to pick somebody. You can do, let's do sales df, and we are going to sample right here. Let's go ahead and control enter that, and we can show those values, and this will actually just give us 1 row at random. We needed 5 rows at random, so if you really wanted to truly spot check your data rather than just showing maybe the first 5 rows or the first 10 rows, you could do something like that. So kind of a nice little win there. Not sure if you ever had to do that, but you got to use like a combination of functions to actually create a row or pick a row at random in your data. So that's pretty exciting. Any questions so far about what we've done so far? How we've done it, but you get the idea. Cool. All right. I see a thumbs up. It looks like some people did come in late, so let me go ahead and just put the downloads in the chat again. Okay, we're in the quick wins file. All right. So next thing we're going to do is look at working with missing values. Now, it looks like this data set that I loaded is actually pretty intact right now. So let's go ahead and I'm going to just delete out, let's say like rows 10 through 15. Just go ahead and delete all those. We have this data set available for us, previous copies, so don't worry if you want to go back to the original. You'll even see what's happening if I do delete rows 10 through 15, is that Python in Excel has a bit of a problem about how to represent this data. Okay, so I'm just deleting rows 10 through 15. I think that's what you mean by, can I repeat? Okay, so you'll notice that what's happening with this is that Python in Excel is having a little bit of a problem with how to represent these cells. Now that really speaks to the fact that there is no dedicated missing value in Excel. Those of you who have used Power Query would know that if we read this data set into Power Query, for example, these would all be picked up as nulls, and they would be specified as nulls. So that's a dedicated keyword that we have in Power Query to tell us that, okay, that is a missing value. It doesn't equal 0. It doesn't mean NA, right? It means it is truly missing. Unfortunately, Excel doesn't really have anything like that. So there's some ambiguity as to what a missing cell like this really means. Okay. Now, what's really nice with this in Python and Excel is that we have some features that will help us easily identify, profile, and point out where we have missing values in our data set. So if you get things in from like an ERP system or payroll or wherever, you're dealing with data sets that, for some reason, the values that are just missing, and you want to know, how many of them are there in what column and so forth, this is a really nice tool for you to use. So the way that we're going to do this is, let's go ahead and run another PY here. I'm going to call this sales DF. Okay. Let's go ahead and just do is NA right now. So we're going to do is NA, open those parentheses. Okay. Control Alt Shift and M is going to be your keyboard shortcut here. So let me put that one in the chat. I've had you do it the manual way a couple times, but we can go to a keyboard shortcut now. Control Shift and M is going to show you each cell in this table. Is it missing or not missing? Okay. Now, again, maybe too much information right now, but what's really nice with this is that we are able to use this as a basis for counting or summing how many missing values we do have in a column. So for example, if I were to change this to a sum, okay, let's go ahead and run that. And you will see that for those of you who have studied computers, right, trues and falses, you try to sum them up with computers, they get turned into ones and zeros. So what we're doing right now is actually able to, count up the number of missing values. If we wanted to maybe express that as a percentage, that would be easy enough to do. Let's go ahead and let's do this as, I think it's len. Okay. Okay. Let me just check that that's working. Okay. That's not quite what I wanted. There is a way to get the number of rows in the data frame. There we go. Okay. So what I did just there, so what this len is doing, PY, let's go ahead, len sales DF. This is just going to give us how many rows are in this data set. So what I'm doing here is just saying, okay, so count up the number of missing rows, right, in each column, divide that by the total number of rows. So now we see that as a percentage. And what's really nice too about Python and Excel is that it's actually kind of hard to format values in Python. So if you're doing this over in like a dedicated Python environment, it would be really difficult to actually make this look like a nice clean percentage sign. All we got to do here is just take those values, right? And I did a control-1 right there. Okay. And we can launch that as a percentage. Okay, so again, what I just did there, control-1 is launch number cell formatter. Okay, and then what we can do is easily see, okay, so 1% of values are missing or 1.2% in each column. We could continue on with this. We could sort this. We could make a graph, whatever we needed to do. So if you're dealing with a lot of messy data where cells are just missing in your data set for some reason, and you never really had like a good system for dealing with those, Python and Excel is definitely an option for you to do that. Okay. Any questions so far about what we've done? If you could let me know things are good. Thank you, JB, for that. That really helps because otherwise, I don't know what you're doing. So appreciate the feedback. Cool. All right. Thank you. It's the Awesome. Okay, I see some other comments. We'll get going with those. Okay, good. Good. All right, thank you, Larry. Thank you, Shonda. Okay, so we're going to move on. I see some people in the chat right now. That's fine. We're going to move on to descriptive statistics next. So, a lot of us who took stats class in school maybe thought we'd never need it again. I actually think it's pretty useful for a lot of business use cases. What can descriptive statistics tell us? How many days is it taking us on average to get paid? What's the average amount of overtime, or what's the maximum amount of overtime that someone took? What are receivables looking like in terms of a range, things like that. Are there any values that just really don't make a lot of sense? What's our most frequently occurring country that we're making orders from? Stuff like that. So you can answer a lot of questions with descriptive statistics. Now, Excel can do descriptive statistics, but it's not the most seamless process. Maybe some of you have used the data analysis tool pack before. What I don't like about the data analysis tool pack is, you have to click it and point it. And once you run that, you run it, right? And there's really no trace of what your data source was. If your data changes in any way, those numbers aren't going to change. So it's really not that nice formula-driven descriptive statistics that we really ought to have. Okay, now Python and Excel definitely solves that. And again, what you're noticing, I'm hoping, is that all of these functions that we've run so far, if we can call them functions or methods specifically, these have been very short. I mean, even for Excel functions, these have been short, right? A lot of them we don't even really need to specify it. We just leave this blank, our methods blank. So I hope you're seeing that, this is not rocket science, as it were. A lot of these packages and the way that this stuff was done for data analysis was written for people who aren't like trained computer scientists, okay? So I hope you're seeing that, this is not hard, all right? So let's go ahead and continue on with that. And in that same vein, run descriptive statistics on our data set. We'll use PY again, and we'll just do sales DF. And we are going to use, what do you think we'll use? The describe method there. Okay, so go ahead, sales DF describe. Again, Control Alt Shift and M is going to be your keyboard shortcut there. And what we will see here is it will give us, what was the average. Well, the order ID probably doesn't mean a lot, but customer ID also not a lot. But what was the average unit price? Could be interesting to know. What was the average quantity on an order? Average order date, so on and so forth. So some of these variables might be more useful than others. We can always, winnow these down, remove some of these if we wanted to. But this gives us a nice easy function. And again, if any of these numbers changed in any way, this is linked back. So, if I really juke the stats on one of these numbers, you will see that that will update. And it looks like I made somebody super old, and we should see the maximum right down there. So pretty interesting stuff there. This is very customizable. For example, maybe you're really more interested in your outliers and you want to know, like, are there any payments that are coming in super early, super late? Or is there anybody taking like no overtime, a lot of overtime, things like that? All we need to do here is just customize right within here. So instead of seeing the quartiles there, if you remember from school, 25th, 50th, and 75th percentile, let's go ahead and just do 0.1, 0.5, and 0.9. So we will see the median, but we will also see the upper and the lower 10th percentiles. Okay, so really useful to be able to do that. And again, just one line of code here, very simple tweaks that we're doing, not needing to write a bunch of wrapped functions. And I think we've all seen those Franken functions in Excel that have wrapped a bunch of different things together. They're very hard to audit and understand. In general, with Python, this stuff is written in a way that you don't need that necessarily. You just take the function that's already been written and you can apply it. So really, really useful here. Okay. Same idea here with the correlation matrix. So if you ever wanted to know, does your budget, as your budget grows, does your marketing spend grow? Does the time on the page grow? Things like that. You want to understand, how your variables are moving together. Really useful feature there. Let's py this again, sales df. Core. Let's go ahead and run that. Now, what I think is going to happen is we are going to get an error because what is happening here is that because some of these variables are not numeric, we can't really correlate them. So what we can do here, and I will fix this right now, and I will give you the answer in the chat here. Let's just take unit price. Okay, let's take quantity. Okay, and let's take customer age. There might be some other variables that could go in here, but what we're going to say here is let's take these three variables and now let's go ahead and correlate those. Okay, so that worked. Okay, so just some basic exploration of our data. Okay, and we could continue on with this. Now where things get really interesting is, and we aren't going to do a lot of data visualization with our data here, but what we can do now is I'm going to visualize this. So let's make a heat map of this data. What we'll do is just take this data source. We're going to use a function on that. Okay, so just like you would use a function for like VLOOKUP, XLOOKUP, index match. Okay, do you know any advanced free Excel courses? I think you're in one right now. I mean, I'll share the other resources that I have, but that's kind of why I'm doing this. So, yeah. All right. So what we just did here is visualize this, and we have a heat map showing, how related is each variable with each other variable. Okay. Yeah. I would also say, as far as like free goes, I mean, free is fine, but it's kind of like going to a grocery store and getting free samples. It can, kind of open up your mind and your eyes, but sometimes it's worth committing to something more if you can. I know, budgets are tight these days, but free being your single objective, I think can backfire in some ways. Anyway, all right. So any questions about what we just did with some basic descriptive statistics here? We're going to move on to time series analysis next. Okay. And we'll focus the rest of our time on, actually, I think what I'll do is show you a couple time series analysis things. And then I think we will have time for Copilot. Cool. Okay. So I see some things going on in the chat. Okay. What we're going to do now is work with dates and times with Python and Excel. Now, one package that we've been using a lot already is called pandas. Okay, so pandas is a cute animal, but also it means panel data, or it was named partly for panel data. So if you remember from school, panel data in social studies class means that you've got multiple categories at multiple points in time, which makes it time series data. So Python and pandas is really good at working with time series data in a way that Excel sometimes isn't. You probably had issues in Excel where the dates are formatted as serial numbers, and you want to be able to like show your data at a weekly level and then monthly, and it just gets very messy and difficult to try to like convert between all the different time series formats. Maybe you've tried to do like a leading and a lagging variable. You can do that with basic formulas, but it breaks very easily. It's very brittle to try to do a lot. Those are called like window functions in SQL. If you try to do like a running average or a running total, things like that, not the easiest to do in basic Excel. So we are going to use Python and Excel just to amp up the power a little bit more. So to do that, we're going to need to do a couple of things. You may or may not have noticed a couple of these runs where we've actually seen, like in this example where we did salesdf.sample5, there's this kind of phantom column over here, and it's not labeled, okay? But it's got these numbers, and this is actually our index in our pandas data frame. So every data frame in pandas has this index. It's something that's in general is something you can really not worry about too much. Okay, it's just something that's being used internally to kind of index every row in the data set. Where the index becomes important is if we want to get the full power out of time series data in Excel. Okay, so what we're going to do here is actually set the index to our time column right now. We're going to open up Python and Excel. Let's do sales TS, and let's do sales. So sales is just TS for time series. sales DF. One thing I haven't really talked about is because we haven't really even had to type that much stuff, but as you're typing more sophisticated things, there is the IntelliSense. So, right, once you see it, it's probably hard to see on my screen, but if you see something, you want to just have Excel complete your thoughts, tab will do that for you. So just be aware that that works just like in regular Excel. So let's take our sales DF. We're going to set our index. Okay. And we're going to set this to our order date. So what we're going to do is just move that index column over so that I'll just Control Shift and M this whole thing. So we'll see that. Now there are some missing values in here. Shouldn't be a problem for what we're going to do, but you'll notice that we do have this kind of nested effect going on. So this index column is what we can use to do some interesting time series analyses. I will put that in the chat right now, just so you have that. Okay. All right. So I'll show you a couple things here. First thing we'll do is let's go ahead. If you've ever wanted to create reports where you wanted to take, maybe you have sales here at a daily level and you wanted to show like the average sale for the week or the average sale for the month. And you can do that with pivot tables. It's kind of difficult because maybe in your mind's eye, you can imagine there's like the date hierarchy. You'd have to get the date hierarchy right. I find this a lot easier just to write a formula to do that for us. So let's try this out. Let's take sales TS. What we're going to do is resample. So resample is just a fancy word for like reaggregating our time series data. Do we want our data at a daily level? Do we want it at a monthly, at a quarterly, and so forth? A W, as it would indicate, you would think it's a week, and yes, it is. So let's resample this by week. And I'm going to take a sum. Now, this notation takes a little bit of getting used to. I would say if you've used Excel tables before, it should feel a little bit intuitive. Those of you might know that, in general, with Excel tables, we would refer to individual columns with those square brackets. So, and it does kind of read like English. It's just weird how like the parentheses and the brackets work together. But, we'll take a weekly sum of quantity is basically how to read that. Okay, that is going to trigger another. This is called a series. So again, this is just a different type of object. That's why it's a series and not data frame. We probably want to see the actual underlying data. So again, Control, Alt, Shift, and M will do that. And that gives us that weekly quantity. If we wanted to change that to an M, we could do that right now. Again, Control and Enter instead of just Enter. If we wanted to change that to, I think what were some of the other variables, maybe units. Okay, that was, if you see Python, that just means you get an error. So that wasn't one of our variables. Let's just do customer age. Why not? Maybe not the most meaningful, but there we get that. Okay, and I'll go ahead and put this in the chat. So really, really useful. And again, this could be, for those of you who are working, I know finance people and accounting people use a lot of time series data. You want to look at, sales daily or hours log daily or, bills from the daily level to the monthly level. There's a lot of like going up and down that date hierarchy in finance and accounting. Python and Excel makes it a little bit easier for us to do. Okay. And last but not least, let's do one more here just to whet our beak here, and then we'll move into Copilot for the rest here. If we wanted to create like a moving average or a cumulative average, really common in finance, right, where you want to maybe try to separate the signal from the noise and take like a 7-day rolling average, or maybe you do want a running total and kind of see how that total progresses over time. Easily done with this. So we're going to do here, let's take sales TS. Let's do actually, I'll share a post with you for that. I'll put this in the resources. I'm looking at the time, and I think we're going to move on to Copilot. But let me just show you what this would look like. I will put this in the resources. I just, for the sake of time, want to make sure that we get to using Copilot. So if you were looking to do things like create leading and lagging variables where you want to move a variable, maybe the true effect of like your payroll or, your receivables or something like that actually aren't shown for another few periods, right? Or maybe they're shown, kind of ahead of, it's kind of a headwind versus a tailwind, as it were. You can make those changes to your data like this, moving cumulative averages. This will also work by group. So maybe you've got like a lot of assets and you want to be able to show that moving average by asset class or by category or region or something like that. That's actually something I found really difficult to do. You actually need to go into like DAX or M and write that code yourself to make those group-wise changes. So if you're doing any kind of analysis that you want to be able to do it by every single group, and that would probably be a good like win to show next time. This is another really useful feature of Python and Excel. It tends to work really well with any of those kind of group-wise analyses. Okay, so that's what we'll do for this. Any questions about, I know we went through like a lot of stuff. I'm sure you won't have memorized it by now, but the takeaway is that like this isn't hard. And it's even less hard when we've got Copilot to help us out. Okay, so what we're going to do now is shift gears and show how can we kind of up the ante a little bit, use generative AI to actually execute and run this code for us and kind of like think through it as well. So that's the next goal here. So what we're going to do is, yeah, if you do have any questions, leave them in the chat. Let's go to advanced analysis here. All right. So we have the famous Palmer Penguins data set. If you've ever kind of played around with like machine learning, you may have seen this before. Really common kind of student data set here. And again, this is this file. Oops, not that one. Right here, advanced analysis. Okay, so if you want to open that one up, now you are going to need Copilot to do this. Okay, so if you don't have a Copilot license, that's fine. Hopefully your organization will get you one before time is up, as it were. So if you don't see Copilot, that's okay. You can just follow along. I'm going to go ahead and click Copilot to get started here. And the first thing we're going to need to do is upload this to our OneDrive. So I'll just do that really quickly here. And again, this is the advanced analysis folder right there. Okay, the advanced analysis workbook, I should say. Okay, cool. All right. So what we're going to see here is that we have a set of example prompts. So, Microsoft and Excel is trying to jog your ideas about what use cases are there for Copilot. I think a lot of people have been pretty underwhelmed with Copilot and Excel in general. I would say that Python is maybe a salve to that. Okay, so if we refresh this, at some point we should see something like give a unique data insight using Python. Okay, that would work. I'm going to go ahead and just keep doing more examples. Perform a forecast using Python. I don't actually see time series data in here, so I don't really know what kind of forecast it's going to give me. But there should be one in here. Okay, give a unique data insight using Python. This would be good to me. If you don't see anything like that, go ahead and just say analyze this data using Python. Okay. Now, for those of you like Justin, you're still kind of wrapping your head around this. This could be really useful because, again, what Copilot's going to do is, sure, it'll give you the code, but ideally, you're going to use it as like that tutor and that pair programmer so that you're feeling more comfortable with how this code works and what it's doing and what it's good for and what are the use cases. So we're going to say analyze this data using Python. I selected this data set. It's going to create a new sheet. It's going to automatically write and insert Python formulas. and we can like chain our prompts together so we can have a conversation with our data. Python is going to be kind of like that translator, okay? Because generative AI in and of itself isn't really that good at like working with numbers, but what it's really good at is generating code, and code is generally pretty good at working with numbers. So we're just using Python as that middle layer between us and the AI. Okay, so let's go ahead and start that. Start with Think Deeper. I haven't really used that too much, but so we're just going to do start, and we'll see what we get. Now, if you've done generative AI before, you know that individual results can and will vary. So what you're doing here might be completely different from what I'm seeing here. Doesn't mean that any of us did anything wrong. This is kind of the nature of how this works with generative AI. Okay. So what we're seeing here is we're almost getting like a little notebook report here. Python and Copilot are trying to mine for some things that it would assume that we would find useful. Okay, so the first step is going to be read in that data set. So this should be pretty familiar, and it would definitely be a good idea to be familiar enough with Python that kind of what the code is doing, and you can speak, it's kind of like being conversant in the language. You don't have to be fluent, but you should be able to make basic conversation with it, okay? So that's what we're going to try to get you up to here. I know in an hour it's probably not enough, but hopefully with the other resources that I'll share, you'll get there. Penguins DF, okay, so we've read that data in. Okay, this is going to give us a preview of the data. So this is actually using some Excel references and notations, kind of like what we did with the head method, but just, I find this a little more confusing, so that's why I did it my way. We'll see, okay, display data set information. Now, sometimes you'll get a none here. Now, this is just for whatever reason. Okay, Penguins DF info. You might see that information over here. Okay, I don't see it actually, so this might be one where Python and Excel just kind of dropped the ball. Sometimes there are things that, for whatever reason, are hard to display in the Excel row and column interface that if you were to use Python kind of independently, it would be easy to do. Okay, but we do have missing values. We looked at missing values earlier. It told us that. We get descriptive statistics. It gave us that. So a couple, again, of quick wins, and hopefully these sets of code look pretty familiar, right? So yeah, descriptive, we talked about describe, right? The missing values, we talked about, okay, it used as null, we used as NA. It should basically be the same thing there. But again, you have that conversational ability to know at a basic level, even, maybe you're not fluent with Python, but you can have that basic conversation with Python and with Copilot to know what's going on. Okay, so where things get really, really interesting is, let's ask something like, I'm going to ask, are there any outliers? I'll put this in the chat as well. Any outliers in the bill length, bill depth, flipper length, or body mass columns? Okay, now the generative AI should be smart enough to know that bill length is this column, bill depth is that column. If you wanted to be even more specific, let me try to make this a little bigger. Bill length, we could, try to spell them out. Bill length like that. But hopefully it will know enough to do the job here. Okay. Let me undo that. Let's go ahead and run this and see what happens. Okay, so it's going to use a particular method called the interquartile range, okay? And it's going to tell us that no, it didn't find any outliers detected using that method. Now, this is where things get really interesting because what you could ask, what are some other methods for outlier detection? Can you apply those as well, right? So being that kind of devil's advocate and just making sure that, you're keeping generative AI kind of on the up and up in terms of trying different things and not just taking the easy way out, right? It's just like a junior analyst might, if you ask them to do something, they might do it, but they'll probably do it in, the most naive way possible, and they might not think about that like level two. So we're really going to try to get Copilot to think like level two. What are some other methods? Doesn't that like kind of surprise you if there aren't any outliers? Maybe we should try some other techniques. Okay, so that is what we'll do there. The z-score method, okay, so it's using z-score, it's using dbScan, using visuals. Okay, so actually, I'm getting more comfortable that maybe there aren't any outliers in this particular data set based on the techniques that are being used. I see the box plot. We could try to get the z-scores, okay? And again, all of this code is being generated. So if we want to, really understand what's being done, if we wanted to, take any of these variables that are being created, and maybe we would like to see these for ourselves. So where we are calculating the z-scores, it might be a good idea to actually come out here, run the z-scores. Okay, so we're getting that variable. And now let's maybe do a control, shift and M, so that we can really see that data set. Now those aren't calculating in Excel for some reason. So I'd have to look a little bit more carefully about why we're not seeing those. But, anything that we can do just to kind of double check the work is a good idea there. Okay, and visualizing the data is often the best way to do that anyway, and we've got that, right? We've got our box plot, okay, and those of you, if you remember, it's probably been a while since you've learned about box plots, you thought about box plots, is that the idea generally is that if you see any individual points that are outside of that whisker, right, box and whisker, any points outside of that box and whisker mean that they are outliers. Okay, interesting stuff. Let's do one more thing here. Can we predict the species of a penguin based on its bill length? I'll put this in the chat. Bill depth, flipper length, and body mass. Okay, so let's see what we get here. Okay, I think Justin or Dino put the last one in the chat, so appreciate that. Okay, so it's going to do its thing here. It's going to run. Okay, and again, this is like your junior analyst. Trust but verify, right? You want to make sure that these results have been kind of thought through. You can ask, what would be some other ways to do this? So use logistic regression. Okay, if you have not heard of logistic regression, if you don't remember, what I like to do often is ask them like, can you visualize these results in some way? Okay, and this is often going to be useful. It says it achieved an accuracy of 100%. I would be a little hesitant to accept that as a given. Okay, what we just got here is a confusion matrix. So if you have heard of that before, basically we are checking how many times did the prediction match what that value actually was in the real world, right? So how many times did we call something as it was in the data set? And it looks like we did this 100% of the time. Would be maybe a little bit concerned about that, so we might want to continue to ask, what are some other ways? What are some assumptions that you made of the data? So on and so forth. Now this is a little bit more sophisticated. This gets more into like machine learning and stuff like that. So let's just kind of clear our palette, and I'll show you one more thing, and then we'll close here. This is one of my favorites here, all pairwise relations in the data. Okay. Yeah, comment about the other way, which we use R. Yeah, there is a way to actually, Anaconda, who stood up a lot of the engineering for this Python and Excel tool. If I go over here to formulas, you'll see that there is, with this Anaconda toolbox tool, which is free, there are some ways to do similar stuff that what we're doing right now with R and Excel. So if you're more of an R person, you can explore that. Okay, but what I just did here was visualize all pairwise relationships, and this is a really nice visual to me, showing us a lot of information in one visual. And again, Excel's often not good at scaling its work. So when we've got multiple relationships, multiple plots, multiple groups that we want to be able to show everything for, we were able to do that with some code here. So really interesting stuff. We can see, are there outliers? Do there tend to be, kind of clusters between the categories? It appears that there are. Now, this is data from like the natural world, biology. Sometimes our business data sets aren't quite as like clean and clustered. So, but still really useful stuff. And again, sometimes these results you might want to sniff test a little bit more. We don't really have the time to do that right now, but when I see 100% accuracy, I just kind of wonder what's going on there. But I think a lot of people generally are more interested in doing stuff like this anyway than necessarily building machine learning models in Excel. You just want to know, what are my missing values, what are my distributions, more on the kind of diagnostic and descriptive side necessarily than predictive, although you can do all that stuff with Python. So that is everything for today. I hope that this was a useful session for you. Before we part ways here, just a couple things. Feedback, like I mentioned, is super, super important. So I'm going to put this link in the chat. I do these for free. I don't ask for any kind of payment. I wouldn't take it. All I really would like is any kind of like feedback. If you can share this, I will share this out over email. So the resources will stay up, the recording will be up. So, leaving feedback is really, really useful. And then I've got a bunch of future events. I know somebody is asking about more free training. So if you want to go to more of those, you are welcome to do that too. Is there any certification? Not for this. I don't really know of any like Python and Excel certifications. You could take some of my paid classes maybe, and you would get a certificate of attendance. I've got like a Modern Excel Magic workshop next week that we're going to go through each layer of Modern Excel one day at a time. You'll get a copy of my book. And you would get a certificate that way. But for these free sessions, I don't offer anything like that. Anyway, I've got one on Friday coming up, AI and Excel for Finance. We're going to go through analyze data, Copilot, and then look at the future of Copilot for finance. And then, like I said, the paid one next week. Bunches and bunches of stuff coming up. Most of these are recorded, and almost all of these are free. But like I talked about, sometimes it is good to get the catered lunch rather than the free samples. It brings things together in a way that you don't necessarily get just piecemeal. Okay, and that's really what this session next week is meant to do. So if you're interested in that, would love to see you. Everything will be recorded, but other than that, I think that's all I've got. If there are any questions, this is your time. I'll stop recording in a second if you want to ask after that. But thanks so much. Hope this was useful stuff, and hope to see you at another event. Thank you, JB. Okay, I'm going to end recording.